On today's edition of NBA Today, the conversation naturally circled back to one name that just won't go away in these trade discussions: Andrew Wiggins. His future has become one of the most talked about questions as we get closer to training camp. And the Los Angeles Lakers have been mentioned time and time again as a team with genuine interest. According to what was brought up on the show, the Lakers still view Wiggins as one of their preferred targets, somebody who could realistically elevate their roster balance, especially on the wing. And there was a sense of urgency behind the way this was discussed. Ideally, Los Angeles would love to secure a deal sooner, rather than dragging it into mid-season chaos. But then the reality sets in. What's the actual price tag? This is where the conversation really started to pick up. Reports have suggested that the Lakers' overall approach has shifted over the last few months. Earlier in the summer, before Luka Doncic signed his extension, there was a lot of hesitation about committing future salary and long-term money. The front office wanted to stay flexible, protect future cap space, and wait until they knew Luka's decision before making their big move. Now, as was highlighted on the program, things have changed. With Luka locked in long-term, Los Angeles is far more incentivized to accelerate their timeline, to press down on the gas, and explore moves that could immediately reshape their roster around LeBron James, Anthony Davis, and Luka. And that's where Wiggins comes in. There's no denying his fit, length, defense, playoff experience, and the ability to slide into different roles depending on what the lineup needs. The question is whether the Lakers can land him without overpaying. No trade is better than a bad trade, and that exact phrase came up on the show. The Lakers have to walk the line carefully. They can't simply give away assets to make a splash, but if the right deal materializes, there's no doubt Wiggins would be the type of player who could push them closer to contention. Now, one detail that was really emphasized today is the financial angle on Miami's side. The Heat are facing some tough decisions. Clearing $30 million plus off their books next season has value in itself, and the Lakers know that. Miami has also been linked to Norman Powell and discussions about a possible new extension, which only adds to the pressure on their books. So yes, there is a very real incentive for the Heat to move Wiggins if the right return comes along. According to reporting that was cited on NBA Today, specifically from Evan Sideri, there's already movement on this front. The Lakers and Heat have in fact reopened trade talks centered on Andrew Wiggins as training camp approaches. Los Angeles has made it clear they're willing to include Dalton Knecht, their most recent first-round pick, along with the necessary expiring salary to make the money work. But here's the sticking point. Miami wants a future first-round pick in the package. That's where everything seems to be stalling right now. And this is where the debate got interesting. Should the Lakers really be putting a first-round pick on the table at this stage? Some argued that Los Angeles would be better off negotiating around swaps or multiple seconds, keeping their first intact unless Miami comes down from their stance. But others pointed out that if the Lakers can preserve Rui Hachimura in the deal, a player Miami reportedly has interest in, then attaching a first-round pick becomes more justifiable. In other words, it depends on the structure. If Rui is involved, it makes sense for Los Angeles to be hesitant about also sacrificing a first. If Rui can be kept out of the deal, then maybe you sweeten the pot with that extra pick to finally get something done. And let's not overlook the long-term implications here. If Rui does stay, he has to be fully committed to his role. He would likely come off the bench this season and maybe next, unless circumstances change with LeBron's eventual departure or a major roster shift. That was part of the conversation today too, making sure Hachimura is both willing and comfortable to embrace that role, because we've seen him struggle when he feels marginalized in the past. If he's locked in mentally, then Los Angeles has more reason to hold on to him and instead part with the first-rounder. From there, the panel broke down the mechanic. Rui's contract sits at $18, $5 million, Knecht at just over $4 million, and that leaves the Lakers still needing to send out another $6+ million to make the math work. That's where names like Gabe Vincent or Maxi Kleber came up. Miami in particular would be very interested in bringing back Vincent, a player who was excellent for them during his stint in South Beach. That potential reunion makes sense for both sides. So the framework of the deal is becoming clearer, even if it hasn't crossed the finish line yet. Rui Hachimura, Dalton Neck, and an additional salary piece like Gabe Vincent, with the big question still hanging over everything being whether or not Los Angeles attaches that first-round pick Miami is demanding. That's the negotiation happening right now, and it's why this story continues to gather steam as camp gets closer. As the discussion continued on NBA Today, the panel dug even deeper into the tug-of-war between the Lakers and the Heat, because the central question is still the same. What exactly will it take to get Miami to say yes? The framework we've been hearing involves Rui Hachimura, Dalton Knecht, and potentially a player like Gabe Vincent, whose return would actually make a lot of sense for Miami. He knows their system, he fits their culture, and on an expiring deal, he would give them the ability to remain competitive while still keeping long-term flexibility intact. That kind of package checks several boxes. But is it enough? That was the sticking point raised on the show. From Los Angeles' perspective, they'd be getting Andrew Wiggins, a player who immediately fills their biggest roster need, while still having room to fill that 15th roster spot later. But from Miami's side, Knecht alone isn't enough to move the needle. The question is whether Rui plus Knecht plus another rotational piece is finally sufficient incentive. And that's where the panel's opinions began to split. Some voices argued that this exact structure could get the deal done by the time training camp begins. Others countered that Miami is going to hold firm, wait things out, and force the Lakers to sweat before making any real concession. And honestly, that might be the reality. Even though Los Angeles is motivated to get this wrapped up before camp, the Heat have leverage in the sense that they don't need to trade Wiggins immediately. They can play hardball, they can stretch this out, and they can let the season itself shape Wiggins' market value. On the program today, that point was emphasized. If the Lakers truly believed Andrew Wiggins was the missing piece, the move that instantly puts them on par with Boston, Denver, or Milwaukee, then this deal would already be finished. The fact that it hasn't been finalized signals at least some hesitation in Los Angeles. Either they see him as a helpful piece, but not the piece, or they're strategically waiting for Miami's demands to soften. That doesn't mean the interest isn't real. Wiggins is still the name most frequently described as the Lakers' top preference. He fits the profile perfectly. Playoff-tested, versatile on defense, capable of sliding between roles, and a wing who can guard multiple positions while spacing the floor. But even if the Lakers land him, it doesn't instantly solve everything. And that's the bigger dilemma, because it forces Rob Pelinka and the front office to weigh short-term upgrades against the cost of sacrificing too much draft capital or too many rotation players. Timing, once again, became a key part of the conversation. Ideally, Los Angeles would like to have Wiggins in camp from day one. That way, he'd have time to develop chemistry with Luka Doncic, Austin Reeves, LeBron James, and DeAndre Ayton. That potential starting five, Luka, Reeves, Wiggins, LeBron, and Ayton, was described on the show as one of the best on paper in all of basketball. But, as the analysts reminded us, paper doesn't always translate into championships. Talent has to mesh, roles have to be accepted, and egos have to be managed. And that led to another crucial layer: role acceptance. Is Andrew Wiggins ready to be the fifth option on a roster like this? Can he embrace nights where his stat line is closer to 8 points on limited attempts, instead of being the second or third scorer? Can Austin Reeves, who has been talked up as the potential third option in LA, accept sliding down to a fourth role if Wiggins emerges as more reliable offensively? And what about DeAndre Ayton, a player who still sees himself as a go-to guy, but who would often have to defer behind LeBron, Luka, and possibly even Reeves? These are the dynamics that make the Lakers' situation so delicate. On the surface, yes, you want as much talent as possible, but internally, you need those players to buy in, to sacrifice, and to lock into roles that aren't always glamorous. That's why, as the panel emphasized, having Wiggins in camp from the very beginning could be invaluable. The sooner you get these guys on the floor together, the sooner you can establish hierarchy, build chemistry, and work through the inevitable growing pain. Still, the idea of waiting until the trade deadline isn't off the table. And that was a point made loud and clear. It wouldn't be the end of the world if Los Angeles played the first half of the season with the roster they have now, assessed how their bench is performing, and then revisited Wiggins later. Because while Wiggins might ultimately prove to be the difference between making the finals and falling short, no one wants to see the Lakers overpay for him right now. The risk of giving up too much and leaving the roster too thin is very real. That's the tension playing out in these negotiations. The Lakers clearly want Wiggins. The Heat know it, and they're testing just how badly Los Angeles wants to make this move before camp. And the Lakers, for now, are holding back just enough to avoid looking desperate. The Lakers' pursuit of Andrew Wiggins brings up an important question. How much of an upgrade would he truly be compared to what Los Angeles already has in place? When you look at Rui Hachimura, Jared Vanderbilt, and even younger depth pieces like Dalton Knecht, the conversation becomes less about replacing talent and more about maximizing fit. Rui, for example, has grown into a reliable scoring option at the 4 who can occasionally slide to the 3, but his defensive ceiling isn't close to what Wiggins provides. That's where the real separation lies. Wiggins has proven throughout his career, and most notably during Golden State's championship run, that he can guard positions 2 through 4 with confidence, switch seamlessly, and take on the opponent's toughest wing assignment. His blend of size, length, and athleticism gives him a versatility that the Lakers sorely lack in their starting unit. On offense, he doesn't represent a downgrade either. While Rui can give you buckets as a mid-range and spot-up threat, Wiggins adds the ability to create his own shot, attack off the dribble, and even facilitate in spurts. In essence, the Lakers wouldn't be sacrificing scoring to get him. They'd simply be adding a more complete two-way piece. But as with any trade scenario, the sticking point comes down to cost. Is Wiggins better than Rui alone? Absolutely, and in a meaningful way. Is he worth Rui plus Knecht, Gabe Vincent, and a first-round pick? That's where hesitation is understandable. At some point, the incremental value he brings doesn't justify stripping the roster of too much depth and future flexibility. That's why Los Angeles has to play this carefully, searching for middle ground, perhaps negotiating pick swaps instead of outright firsts, or packaging second-round assets rather than overextending. Another layer to consider is chemistry. Plugging in Wiggins doesn't automatically solve every issue. Yes, he fits multiple positions and addresses defensive concerns, but the Lakers will still need to shore up their bench and keep balance across the roster. If, however, acquiring him is paired with signing proven veterans, names like Al Horford or DeAnthony Melton have been floated, then the picture changes entirely. Adding Wiggins alongside steady depth pieces could elevate Los Angeles from a fringe contender to a legitimate threat in the West. Timing also plays a critical role here. With training camp right around the corner, both the Warriors and Lakers may feel increased urgency to finalize rosters. Golden State's front office is facing pressure with multiple players reportedly growing restless about their situation, and that could open the door for Los Angeles to strike at a more favorable price. From the Lakers' perspective, locking in a two-way wing before the season starts could be the final piece of the puzzle to complement LeBron James and Anthony Davis. In the end, this comes down to calculated risk. Wiggins isn't just a name, he's a proven playoff performer who has already thrived in a championship environment. But the Lakers have to decide how far they're willing to go without mortgaging too much of their future or disrupting the depth they've worked to build. If Rob Pelinka can find that balance, Wiggins could be the type of acquisition that raises the team's ceiling without breaking the foundation.